Walter Cronkite, the Dean of American Newsmen, died yesterday at 92 with his family by his side. The cause, cerebrovascular disease, or as his son described it, complications from dementia. He was a towering figure in this business and holds an iconic place in the collective memory of generations of Americans.
The CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
He was known to a generation as the most trusted man in America.
Good evening. President Reagan today opened...
Walter Cronkite brought a level of experience and credibility to the anchor desk that few have ever matched. He got his start working for newspapers and radio stations across Texas and the Midwest, then headed overseas to cover World War II for the United Press. Cronkite signed on with CBS in 1950, and it wasn't all gravitas. For a while, he co-hosted The Morning Show with a puppet named Charlemagne. But he quickly made his name at the network with his political coverage.
Never, certainly in our recent history, have there been such perilous times in which to conduct such a campaign.
In 1962, he was promoted to anchor of the CBS Evening News, and a year later,
Here is a bulletin from CBS News.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
he struggled to keep his composure while bringing the country tragic news.
Vice President Lyndon Johnson has left the hospital in Dallas, but we do not know to where he has proceeded.
At other times, he shared the country's joy.
Neil Armstrong, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon.
It was during the Vietnam War that Cronkite's true stature with the American public became clear. In 1968, he returned from a trip to Vietnam disillusioned. And in a stunning break from journalistic objectivity, he ended his report by announcing he did not think the war was winnable.
For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is to end in a stalemate.
It was a turning point. President Johnson later said he knew if he'd lost Cronkite, he'd lost Middle America.
Kennedy,
Cronkite continued to anchor the top-rated evening newscast till 1981.
This is my last broadcast as the anchorman of the CBS Evening News.
CBS forced him to retire when he turned 65 and brought in Dan Rather to replace him.
Space Center, Walter.
But years after he signed off for the last time, millions of Americans still remember how reassuring it was to hear Walter Cronkite have the last word.
And that's the way it is. Friday, March 6, 1981.
And we are joined now by our own ABC anchor of World News with Charlie Gibson. Charlie, good morning from Cape Cod. Good to see you.
Good morning, Kate.
The term anchor,
Good to see you.
The anchor term was basically coined for Walter Cronkite. Talk about what you think he did for television news.
Well, it was coined for him. It was coined in the coverage of the first conventions on television. That was 1952, when the Republicans nominated Dwight Eisenhower and the Democrats nominated Adlai Stevenson, and they had to come up with some word for it, and so they called him the anchor, and that term has stuck ever since. But I think, Kate, we were extraordinarily fortunate that he was the first. He was the paradigm. He was the example that has come down through the years for all of us, because he had such solid training. He was trained in the wire service way of reporting, the basic, you know, who, what, why, where, when. He came along when there was not the flash and dash that there is in television now. It basically was Walter sitting in, you know, behind a desk. And he just did it right. His compass was absolutely on point. And he understood that it was about the news. It wasn't about him, although people came to trust him. It was about the news. And that is something I think that all of us keep in the back of our minds all the time.
Well, he was known as so objective, but there was that moment that we just showed a moment ago, 1968, when he came out and basically said he was against the Vietnam War. Was that a turning point at all?
Well, it was something of a big deal when he added commentary to the show. It's interesting, you know, Bill, in that piece had the, and that's the way it is, the way Walter ended the show each night. But when he would do commentary, he didn't say, and that's the way it is. He ended the show differently. He understood that that was an injection of something that wasn't necessarily the way it was. It was the way he thought it was.
I imagine when you became anchor of World News and were trying to figure out how to sign off at night, you probably thought about, and that's the way it was.
Well, one of the things, Kate, that was interesting, I had a conversation with Cronkite, probably 10, 15 years ago. And he was, you could tell, even though he was long since retired, he was still programming evening news shows in his mind. And he said to me, I don't understand why the anchors, and I was working at Good Morning America at the time, but he said, I don't understand why Peter and Tom and Dan have those promotions the day before the show to tell you one of the stories they're going to do the next day. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, and it's about the news, and we can't be promoting things that are going to be in the show. We've only got 22 minutes. Let's stick to the news. Well, of course, because of the desire for ratings, et cetera, we do promote pieces the day before, but often now when we have the 3:30 meeting or whatever in my office, when we're putting the final touches on the evening newscast, we will take out of the show the promoted piece, because there is too much news. We're trying to fit 20 pounds of potatoes into a 10-pound bag. You know what it's like. And so sometimes we'll kill the promoted piece. And I always think in the back of my mind, Walter, that's exactly the way you said it ought to be.
That's the way he did it. He didn't like the trappings of it, did he? He didn't like the celebrity element.
Never understood it. And I had a conversation with him about that, about why it is that people react to the individual who is there as opposed to what you're talking about. And of course, there were many people who thought, as the most trusted man in America, that Walter ought to run for office. And he just thought that was heretical. I mean, that was just beyond anything he could imagine, because that was not what he was about. He was a reporter. He'd wanted to be a reporter ever since he was a kid, and he was a damn good one.
And we'll leave it at that. Charlie, thank you so much for your reflections this morning. Be well.
Yeah, it is a tremendous loss to the business and to some respects, I think, Kate, to the country.